I was in two full contact martial arts when I was younger. One was traditional and the other was sport. The former relied on belts to denote competency. The latter did not. The traditional art emphasized the tying of my belt before I entered into sparring, whereas the sport art didn't have belts at all. But the sport art did have hand wraps, and you couldn't enter into sparring unless you wrapped your hands. The rituals before entering into sparring couldn't be more dissimilar, but still follow a parallel process, if that makes sense. Because you quite simply weren't allowed to spar if you didn't have your belt properly secured. In the other art, if you didn't have your hands properly wrapped, you weren't allowed to spar there either. But the belt tying was specific. It had to be done in accordance with tradition, in line with that specific martial art. As opposed to how you wrap your hands before sparring in the sport art, because there is no right way to wrap your hands. There's just a bunch of wrong ways. And it has everything to do with why you're wrapping your hands in the first place. So why are you wrapping your hands? Let's come back to that. First, I have another question. Why do martial artists have colored belts? If it was just to hold their pants up, schools wouldn't lose impatient students to faster promoting instructors. But they do all the time. It happens every day. And the reason for that impatience tends to come from a place of wanting that external validation, the confirmation that you are good at something. Because the color of the belt does represent a rank, and rank is everything in traditional martial arts. Same thing with hand wraps? Not so much. Because when you ask if hand wraps are a symbol in the same way as a belt is, the answer is no. Because hand wraps represent something different than a belt does. But because of that, one of the biggest differences that I picked up on was how when I tied my belt on, it told my peers what I had already accomplished up to that date. When I put my hand wraps on, it told my peers that I was prepared to do work in that moment, that day. And it didn't take me long to categorize one act as a minor ritual symbolizing everything that I had done up to that point, and the other as a symbolic gesture, a ritual of what I was preparing to do. Tying a belt on in class changed how others perceived me, but wrapping my hands in class changed how I perceived myself. And that's why I have largely gone through my life ignoring symbols and embracing rituals, especially in martial arts, but in other domains too. Symbols can be falsified. They can be empty of meaning, whereas rituals require effort and they tend to create meaning. And that's part of why I eventually abandoned my traditional art in favor of the sport art. I fully embraced my sport art because I fully embraced the rituals within it, whereas I couldn't quite fully embrace the symbols in my traditional art, and my traditional art lacked rituals. I'm not one that wears particular symbols in the hopes of having people respect what I've done or who I am because of that symbol. What I look for is people to respect who I am because of the rituals I perform and where I'm going with them. Unless you're some kind of sociopath awarding yourself belts. Those exist.